Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Ness's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith in the Constitution, and we are committed to giving voice to the truth, living with courage, and taking action. It is Tuesday, December 2nd. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog and chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group and birthday boy today, Chris Alexander.
Well,
Hey,
good
Chris,
morning, Danielle. There's
Good morning.
no one with whom I'd rather spend an hour or two this morning on the birthday than you, other than Katie, of course.
I was going to say definitely Katie, but I know she's not far from you.
She's not far.
Awesome. Well, we are coming to you all live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. You can also catch us later on our audio-only platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. We are so looking forward to today's conversation, and we had a few technical snafus this morning, but it's not slowing us down. We will be talking today to our good friend Bert Callais. He is a U.S. Army veteran. He's a member of West Baton Rouge Parish's Election Board of Supervisors, and he's an election integrity advocate. Bert, as you may know, is the lead plaintiff in the congressional redistricting case that went to the Supreme Court, Callais versus Louisiana. And today we'll be talking about that case and the new case that he's gearing up to bring against the state, alleging the unconstitutionality of our elections and citizen participation in our elections. His attorney for the case is also joining us, Jeff Wittenbrink, and Jeff has an incredible track record of taking cases where the state is seen to be violating core constitutional rights of citizens, including the nationally recognized case of Pastor Tony Spell related to the COVID mandates. Many of you will remember that. So before we get into this very spicy conversation, let me read the scripture of the day to get us off on the right foot after all of our technical battles.
Which you prevailed over all of them, Danielle, as I sat and just watched admirably.
Look, we're making a way where there is no way. That's what we're doing here, Chris. All right. It's Psalms chapter 14, verses 4-7. And it says, "Look how they live in luxury while exploiting my people. Won't these workers of wickedness ever learn? Don't they ever even think of praying to God? But just look at them now in panic, trembling with terror. For the Lord is on the side of the generation of loyal lovers. The Lord is always the safest place for the poor when the workers of wickedness oppress them. How I wish that Israel's rescue would arise from the midst of Zion. When his people are restored, Jacob's joy will break forth and Israel will be glad." And Chris, I loved that when I was reading it this morning, because isn't it a great reminder that the Lord sees us? He sees those in positions of power, and he sees how they oppress his people. And those who put themselves so high above us are no match for him. And as arrogant and godless as they are, they will panic and they will be terrorized by the Lord himself, because the Lord will bring justice and recompense to his people. And I believe that the Lord's been moving the pieces into place behind the scenes all this time. And now we are in what I believe to be the early stages of seeing justice manifest like tiny little flower buds. And soon we're going to be seeing justice in full bloom all around us.
No question about it, Danielle. We will. One of the things that I love about the Lord that we serve so much is that he always has an eye and a heart for the vulnerable.
Yeah.
He always has an eye and a heart for the poor, the vulnerable, the exploited, the imprisoned, the outcast, the oppressed. We don't worship a God who delights in the abuse of power or the abuse of authority. We worship a God who is revolted by that. And even more importantly, a God who does exact justice in his own way, in his own time. And I just love the fact that our God has a heart for the vulnerable and for the oppressed. And there's no one that is more vulnerable or more oppressed in Louisiana right now than hardworking Louisiana citizens who simply want a government that is responsive to their needs and a government that simply discharges its constitutional responsibilities. And unfortunately, on too many fronts, we're not getting that. But we have on the show today, as you mentioned, two real fighters for the citizens. And there's no question that they are on the side of the citizens. They both have a track record in different spheres to prove that. And I believe that they're obviously on the side of God and God's justice. Jeff Wittenbrink and Bert Callais, both friends of mine, and
joining by phone. I can't remember, Chris, if I said that they were joining by phone.
Yes, joining by phone this morning. But nonetheless, the most important thing, I would much rather be able to hear their voice than simply see a picture and not be able to talk to them. So they have authenticated their identity. And it is, in fact, Jeff Wittenbrink and Bert Callais. Welcome both to the State of Freedom, guys.
Glad to be here. Good morning.
I want to start here, Bert, with the redistricting issue. We've had the lead attorney in the redistricting case, Paul Hurd, on the show a number of times, but we've never had the privilege of having the lead plaintiff in the redistricting case on the State of Freedom. So, Bert, welcome. And I want to just start here. I was down at the legislature with you when this grossly unconstitutional racial gerrymander was passed, SB 8, and you testified very eloquently against it, as you do on a number of other issues. But what was it about this particular issue that prompted you and inspired you to actually become the lead plaintiff in a case that has received and continues to receive national import and national profile?
Just everything that I heard. I mean, when I went down there, as you know, they were late when they started the committee. I did come across a representative who came to the committee room earlier, and I said, what's going on? Why are we so late? And he said, well, the governor and some legislatures are back there playing chess. And I said, yeah, and they're making us the sacrificial pawns.
So they were back there, Bert, trying to figure out how they were going to be able to get this obnoxious piece of legislation that created a racially gerrymandered district for Cleo Fields and eliminated a Republican seat in Congress. That's what they were back there trying to figure out.
That's what came out of it all. I mean, going through the committee meeting and stuff and watching their reactions to your testimony and to Paul Hurd's testimony, you could see that they were already had made a decision no matter what we said. And, it just became obvious.
Yeah. One of the points you made, Bert, in your testimony that I'll always remember, it was one of the last comments that you made in opposition to this bill, was that one of the primary problems that we have in our government now is the abuse of federal authority. And this Obama appointed judge appeared to both Mike Johnson, to you, to Paul Hurd, and to many others as really engaging in an abuse of authority and trying to impose her will on what really is a constitutional prerogative of the state legislature to draw a district that's constitutional. And obviously you continue to believe that the abuse of federal authority and the encroachment into what is really the constitutional authority of the state is a huge problem in our country now.
Exactly. So it appeared that as it came out, it was a supposed threat. We didn't actually go to court to find out for sure one way or the other that this judge was going to force us. That's what we were being told. And that's what the legislators kept saying over and over again, that the federal judge is going to force us if we don't do this now and that kind of thing. And that was a narrative that I learned that wasn't quite fact at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't read anything maybe there was some article out there or whatever where she made this kind of statement, but is a judge supposed to do that before hearing the case and the merits ahead of time? If that's the case, then we don't have blind justice. We have, predeterminations for what's going to happen.
Well,
yeah.
I think that's absolutely true, Bert. I think we're seeing that in a lot of venues. But I agree with you. Chris and I have debated quite a bit here whether the narrative that was put out and the talking points that were put out to the legislature, which was a brand new legislature. I mean, they had just been sworn in days before, right? That what they were being told was not 100% on the up and up related to that case.
That's right, Danielle, and that's exactly right. And Bert testified that this is probably illegal. Paul Hurd testified that 90% of this district that they were proposing was previously declared unconstitutional a number of years ago. And Speaker Mike Johnson was urging the legislature to go in and fight for the current district that we had, which did include Republican Garrett Graves, who was ultimately excised out of his congressional seat. And here we are now, 19 months later, with Bert as the lead plaintiff, and the Supreme Court appears to be on the verge of doing exactly what we warned was probably going to happen, which is to reverse this seat and maybe even declare the voting, the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional altogether, which could have implications for congressional seats across the country. But Bert, you are truly a real patriot for standing up and doing this, for your state and for your country. So hats off to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Bert.
You're welcome. And Christopher, after you testified, there was a legislator, and she said that they just want a seat at the table and they don't feel represented unless they look like them. And I just thought that was, I mean, I wanted to fall out of my chair when I heard that. I really did. And it just got me thinking, well, if that's the case, then by your own words, I'm not being represented. This is what I'm thinking the whole time while I'm hearing that.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah, because my state representative, he's black, and I'm white, and so is my senator. And so is already in District 2, Congressional District 2, Troy Carter, he's black. So I guess if what you're saying, what she was saying was true, it's no wonder they don't listen or respond to anything I request of them.
Well,
and it just, that kind of division, that's what needs to stop.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
not,
Representation should be based on values, not skin color.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Bert, and
I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there with the whole pretext for SB 8 was, this is not about race, even though that is a factor, but it's not predominantly about race. Yet, in my opposition testimony, I'm getting peppered with questions from 3 African-American female legislators, and every single question was about how they cannot be properly represented unless they have a black district, a black congressman. And I'm thinking to myself, but I thought none of this was about race. And so, that is sort of what So they really put on, I think, the best case, not even knowing it, for our argument.
Exactly. They handed it to us with those statements. I believe they were used in court. The transcripts of that early on when it was being heard in district court in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Bert Paul Hurd has said that if the Supreme Court has issued a ruling by February, that would be sufficient time for Secretary of State Nancy Landry to get the election set up for the 2026 primaries. Although for some of us, the primaries don't mean a whole lot because we believe that there are significant violations to the integrity of our elections and the sanctity of our vote, which is why y'all are bringing this other suit. So maybe, Jeff, I'll ask you, would you tell us about the lawsuit as it relates to the unconstitutionality of the current voting system in Louisiana?
Yes, sure. So the current voting system in Louisiana is done all by electronic. They call them voting machines. They're actually computers. And it's all done on computers. And the vote is counted inside the computer. The computer will spit out a tape at the end that has a count on it, but it's not counted by any recognizable means except by what the computer does inside, which is protected by proprietary software. No one that is allowed to see the software except the manufacturer or its representatives. And so there's no way of telling what's going on inside the black box. Our Constitution, our Louisiana Constitution, requires the votes to be counted publicly. That's one of the requirements for voting. Back when they enacted the 1974 Constitution, they took most matters regarding elections out of the Constitution, but they left in the Constitution that votes be public and votes be counted publicly. Or, excuse me, votes be private, but the votes be counted publicly. And that's to ensure that everyone knows that each vote is counted and that they're all accounted for in the correct place. A vote inside a black box is a vote inside a black box. It's like a magic trick. Once you can't see it, you don't know where it's gone. And so, and here's the thing. We don't have to cast any aspersions on the motives of the people doing it. We don't have to even say, that we think it's nefarious somehow. The main thing is you can't see it. And the people are entitled to see it. They're entitled to know how the votes are being counted and see the votes being counted. And that's, it's conceivable that you could have voting machines that actually counted the votes publicly. You could actually do that. You could see that, you would have an image and that you would count that vote right at the time and you could tally the votes along with the computer as you went. I mean, it's conceivable that could be done. And, maybe that is something that would be done one day. The problem is that our Secretary of the State and other people supporting her with these voting machines truly believe that this is the modern and most efficient way to count votes. And that's the true problem. You never, you can't assume or presume that folks are doing things for illicit reasons. Because I know plenty of people that support voting machines, including people that I greatly respect, that have the opinion that this is the proper way to do it simply because it would just be too cumbersome to vote by hand and on paper and to count all those ballots. And I think that there are several people that have shown me that you can do it, that it is possible to do it properly. Other countries do it properly. And that, we can have a proper public counting without having a machine. Yeah. The fact of the matter is right now we do not have public counting.
Yeah. And so Jeff, your argument really is really narrow, and it doesn't even necessarily really address the vulnerabilities of computer-based voting. in terms of the manipulation of results and that sort of thing. Your argument is much narrower and simply saying that our current system facially violates the Louisiana Constitution simply because the votes are not counted publicly.
That's exactly correct, Chris. Now, there are arguments about the vulnerability, and there are arguments that the machines have been used for cheating. But you may recall that Dominion had a defamation lawsuit, which they won with regard to cheating in the elections. And the problem is they have the resources and they have the ability to litigate these things out. And so you got to be really careful about impugning how the machines have been used or accusing them of actual cheating if you cannot prove it. I have not seen that evidence. I do have experts that are willing to say that, they believe that they can prove cheating, but it's not necessary to prove that for the purposes of our case.
Yeah.
Our case is about the fact that the Louisiana Constitution requires a public vote, and there's a very good reason for that. To have confidence of the public, you've got to have a public count. That's really the bottom line, and that's why the people who wrote the Constitution put that in there.
Yeah.
In fact, it was Woody Jenkins made the speech saying that part of the Constitution had to remain. It had to remain in the Constitution of Louisiana that voting were private and the public counted it, were publicly counted. And so even though he may disagree about the use of voting machines, he did feel strongly about public counting at the time, and that's why it's in there.
Yeah. And I'm assuming, Jeff, that you haven't heard any word or have any reason to believe that the Secretary of State is trying to implement any kind of system whereby there could at least be, the appearance that the computer-based voting is counted publicly. So she's not really trying to remedy your grievance.
Well, so one thing that we've been watching very carefully is the kind of machine, the kind of system that's been proposed. And really, as far as they're going right now, they're requiring that there be a paper image created, and that those paper images would be preserved for a limited audit purpose. So in other words, you could never have a full audit, but you would have a limited audit. And again, it's not publicly counted, but it could be publicly audited on a limited basis. And so the question is, what are the parameters of that?
Jeff, not to interrupt you, but it's also, I mean, if the audit is only limited, then the second part of the constitutional requirement that they have to be preserved inviolate in the event that there is a contested
exactly
election,
right.
That also is not satisfied.
Well, that's exactly right. Of course, right now, as we're voting, as we speak, I mean, as we're talking right now, Louisiana elections, they don't preserve any votes inviolate, do they? None. They go into the magic box, they're counted, they save a tape, but the votes themselves are not preserved inviolate. They're not preserved. We have no means for a recount of votes. The only votes that can be recounted are those votes that come in absentee, because they come in on paper, and you can recount those. And in truth and in fact, that's one thing that has basically revealed how vulnerable Louisiana is. You know, our Secretary of State brags about the security of our elections, but when we had a sheriff's election up in Caddo Parish back in 2022, it came within just a few votes. They had to recount only the paper ballots, and they still could not resolve the election. They had to have a brand new election because they could not do a recount. And being unable to do a recount means the votes are not being preserved. You can't have a full audit. You'll never really know how the vote went. And so both of those things are being violated. That's absolutely correct, Chris. And I had forgotten that second part of the lawsuit, because we did also allege that. We'd been paused for a period of time to see they passed the new statute that gave Nancy Lander the authority to go out and get new voting systems. But there's been such a delay in getting new systems and such a delay in getting anything implemented. And the things that they're speaking about are still not going to alleviate the problems, at least as far as we see it.
And Jeff, one thing that really strikes me about this whole situation in Louisiana is the fact that they just expect us to trust them. So they say our elections are the most secure that they've ever been because we said so. We have no proof to back that up. And if you want to see the proof, we absolutely cannot show you because it's proprietary. But trust us, it's safe. We promise. Now, that is exactly the kind of logic that had Woody Jenkins stand up in the 70s and say, these things have to be counted publicly because people cannot be trusted.
Well, that's exactly right. And you can't, it's completely unfair. It's almost ridiculous to just say you have to trust us. I mean, that's, time and time again, we've revealed corruption in our elected officials. And frankly, especially with regard to money and to large amounts of contracts that are going for these voting machines. President Trump pointed out the fact that these voting machine systems cost billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's so much money spent all over the country over this technology. And what are we doing with the technology, Danielle? We're adding 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. You could literally do it with a thumb counter. You could, it's not technology that is needed. You don't need an algorithm to count arithmetically votes for candidates.
That's exactly
It's simply
right.
not necessary.
That's exactly right. And we are paying for to lease machines. We're paying to lease tablets. We're paying to store these things. We're paying for the transportation to get them there the day of the election, to lock them up. We're also paying these companies to be able to sue the oblivion out of us if we say anything negative about them. It's our money.
That's exactly right.
It's a great point.
It's unbelievable.
And Jeff, Bert was down there at the legislature. At least I think Bert was there. Speaking of 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, there was a group. Bert, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bert. I think it was the last day of the recent session when several 7th or 8th graders actually participated in a hand count demo at the Capitol and understood it very well. It was a very simple process, very reliable process. You were there for that, right?
I was not there. I think maybe Bert was.
Bert, you were there for that, right?
Bert, you may still be on mute.
Yeah, it was 4th graders.
Fourth graders.
Okay, 4th graders.
Yeah, there was all various grades, but we did have some very young children that stepped up, and once it was explained to them, they were able to follow along and actually conduct a hand count. We use what we call a pitch count type bubble sheet with the numbers in it, so it was pretty easy to follow, and of course they came out with a perfect score each time once they got the hang of it.
The only people who can't who can't get that right is the politicians. 4th graders, they got it under control.
Yeah,
right.
Sometimes I think we'd probably be a little bit better off if we had 4th and 5th graders, as the majority legislators in the state. I think maybe the things
they could see things more clearly, huh?
See things a little more clearly. But Jeff, I have a feeling that one of your exhibits or one of your arguments is going to be exactly the fiasco that you described in Caddo Parish, which was just that, a fiasco. So an election was contested there because it was so very close. And because our system is so deficient, they had to go back and conduct an entire new election in the sheriff's race up there because that was the only way they could get a reliable outcome. Is that right?
Well, that's right. And frankly, you still obviously don't know by the time all's said and done, because you still can't really examine the vote. I mean, regardless of which way the vote turns, the vote is the vote. The vote comes out of the black box, and whoever the black box says wins. So, yes, they had to have a new election. Yes, the second election was a little. There were more votes counted for one candidate than the other, and they were pretty clearly more for one than the other. But you can't really tell, right?
Yeah. Well, because they did the second count, the do-over, in the same way they did the first one. So we still don't know, and it was still not counted publicly. So it was done deficiently twice, is basically what we're saying here. But I want to switch gears for a second here, and Jeff, and ask you, and Bert, I want you to comment on this too, about SB 436. LeCag was at the legislature. I know Bert was there, and this was in 2024, I believe. And there was a law passed that specifically and very simply, it was just codifying the constitutional requirement that anybody registering to vote in Louisiana provide adequate, simple but adequate proof of citizenship when they're registering to vote in the state of Louisiana. That law has now been on the books since January of this year, going on 10 months, 11 months now, and is still not being enforced by the Secretary of State. Is that going to be, my understanding is that may be a component, maybe in the form of a mandamus action, to get the court to order the Secretary of State to basically enforce the law, current Louisiana law on this issue.
Well, that's correct. We want to amend our petition to add this statutory claim because it's also a constitutional claim, and it's also important to the integrity of our elections. And as we continue to find out more and more all across the country, we have folks that are simply not entitled to vote, voting and participating in elections, and thereby diluting the votes of American citizens, Louisiana citizens. And so, the legislature passed this law to make sure that it was going to be taken care of. And of course, it's being ignored. And, say, well, we can't do that right now, or we don't have the means to do that. But it's the law. And so someone's got to enforce it. Someone's got to make them do it. We are in a unique position with Mr. Callais because he's been willing to stand up, and he is actually an election official, and he's an elected official. And so because of that, he has standing, you see. And now, if any of you all know legislators, I would urge you that we should have the same rights as many other citizens across the country. In many states, any voter has standing to bring a lawsuit to enforce election law. That is not the law in Louisiana.
Wow.
And they can get suits dismissed. They can get suits dismissed for lack of standing because an individual voter simply doesn't have the right to bring a lawsuit to enforce the law.
What a crock.
But because it really is, it's a terrible thing. If you know a brave legislator, that's exactly legislation that we need. Because it should be impossible for elected officials to literally thumb their nose at a voter who says, hey, you're not following the law. They do it at their convenience. They tell us to trust them. It's really an impossible situation. But Mr. Callais is a unicorn. He's a unicorn because he is an elected official. He has standing to sue, and he's also a unicorn because he's brave enough to do it and does not mind the consequences or being a target. And so that's very fortunate for us and for the citizens of Louisiana that we have such a person. You can be the best lawyer in the world, and I don't make any claim to that, but you can be the best lawyer, but you got to have a client. And you got to have a client who is brave, who is willing to take the heat, and willing to go forward. And so that's why we're very fortunate to have Mr. Callais.
Yeah, we absolutely
Unicorn.
are.
Wow.
Well,
Have
he's
you ever been called a
yeah.
unicorn? Have you ever been
Yeah,
called a unicorn
right.
before, Bert?
Man,
And he's a combat veteran. Combat veteran. So, you know,
yeah.
I'm sure that Bert has, as a combat veteran, probably has seen more harrowing situations than being a plaintiff in this lawsuit. So I think his background probably prepares you very well for it, Bert.
Look, when you serve overseas and you leave your family and you get your mind right about why you're there, you know, of course it's the man next to you. You want to take care of him because you're dependent on him to help take care of you. But overall, it's in defense of this country. And Nancy Landry, initially that bill was going to go into effect upon the signature of the governor. And she had repeatedly requested that she have more time. And she was given until January of the following year.
After
That's
President Trump's
indicator.
election, right, Bert? That was the big
Yes.
stink for us.
Yes. And so with that request, that is an indicator that, yes, I will implement this. I just need time to do it. And yet it's still not happening.
Yeah.
And I'm fed up with this.
Yeah. And
I'm fed up with this.
Bert, you know, when Paul Hurd was on the show, he was talking to us about criminal malfeasance in relation to something else, relation to, I believe, New Orleans. But when a public official willingly and knowingly is not performing their duties that are outlined by law, when does this become malfeasance? I mean, at some point you have to tip over from being negligent to not doing your job on purpose, right?
Yes. So, and again, you know, we take an oath to the Constitution to defend it against enemies, foreign and domestic. And a lot of times, and I'll be honest, I took the oath. I don't know. I didn't know exactly what all's in the Constitution. It's very broad and nearly impossible. But you got the basics of it, right? And as I got more and more involved in the civics of our government and actually showing up and seeing for myself, you learn things. And I learned recently from the CCS folks who are totally against that and the unconstitutionality of eminent domain from a retired Air Force colonel. And this, like I said, some phrases just stick. They just stick like a tattoo. And he said, when the Constitution is in violation, or there's a violation of the Constitution, it must be challenged. And for me, being a military guy, y'all know I was also in the Navy. To me, that's a directive. It must be challenged. And if I'm going to take an oath to defend the Constitution, and in the National Guard, that oath includes the state constitution, which I was a part of. That's what I want to do. I mean,
and you're doing it, Bert. You're doing it, but you're just doing it in a different venue and in a different forum where you're not being shot at. At least you're not being literally shot at. You're being shot at and attacked politically in certain quarters. But as I said, I'm sure that pales in comparison to what you've actually seen. Jeff, let me ask you to respond to what you said earlier. You had suggested that the Secretary of State maybe doesn't have the wherewithal or the resources, or maybe she doesn't know how to enforce a citizenship requirement, basically to enforce the law. Well, two responses to that. She never made any suggestion during the debates on this bill that she would be unable to create a mechanism to enforce this law. And secondly, that's her job. And it's not something, Jeff, if you were the Secretary of State, Bert, if you were the Secretary of State, Danielle, or many others, if they were charged with the responsibility to create a system whereby you could confirm, absolutely confirm, someone's citizenship before they're allowed to register to vote in our state. I guarantee you could come up with a system that's not unduly onerous, not unduly burdensome, but that's very effective and very reliable, and you would do that. And she's simply not doing it 10 or 11 months later. So if you're not going to be able to enforce the law, then don't sit at a committee table during legislation and derive political benefit from proposing something that you know the majority of Louisiana citizens support if you're not going to do the work to enforce it. And that's our position. So I'm glad that the lawsuit may well be amended to include that allegation, because I think it's extremely important.
Well, it is extremely important. And the fact of the matter is now, we have real ID in Louisiana. Most people have real ID. You've got to go either take a passport or a birth certificate and prove that you're a citizen of the country, and that that's happening now for everyone. And so, literally, you could just take your real ID and take it with you when you register to vote, and you're done. It's not that difficult. When you go to get real ID, they ask you to bring a birth certificate and some other identifying paperwork to show who you are, and it's fairly easy. They don't even ask for a blood test or put a microchip on you or anything like that. So it's really not that cumbersome. You can go and get that done, and you can have all the proof you would need to prove that you're a citizen.
Right.
And I don't think it's unfair to ask for that. And it's the law of the land, and it should be the law, and it should be, of course, it's a constitutional requirement to vote in our federal elections. So
that's right. And she admitted recently in the legislative session, she was asked a question in committee by a Democrat on the committee, somewhat ironically. And the question was, Secretary Landry, if someone comes in and they're registering to vote, other than check off the question that says, are you a U.S. citizen? If they say yes, he said, is there anything that the secretary, this was at that time 7 months after this bill became effective and enforceable. And they said, and he asked, what do you do in that situation to confirm whether or not they're telling you the truth when they're registering to vote? And she said, it's the honor system. We basically take them at their word. This is 6 or 7 months after the bill we're talking about became enforceable. And we have, we have the video, and we've shared it on social media and with others. So she's admitting on record in a legislative committee earlier this year that the law is not being enforced.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that, Chris, she mentioned as well, I think in the same clip, that she, or the same hearing, that she used some federal tool that would cross-check our voter rolls with the illegals, to be able to pull the illegals out of our central database. And, it came out that there were 2 handfuls of illegally registered people, and everybody else was completely kosher. But I don't think that the honor system plus cross-checking a database of illegal immigrants, which by very definition, we cannot have all of the illegal immigrants in a database. Right. I mean, I don't think that's a far stretch to make.
Yes. And what does that have to do with the law that requires, we're not talking here about people who are already illegally on the rolls. We're talking about preventing more people from getting on the rolls illegally, and it's just not being enforced. And Bert, you may be able to confirm this, as a member of the local board of supervisors, and being in touch periodically with registrars, to whom the Secretary of State is supposed to be providing guidance on enforcement of this law. And in your experience, it's not being done. In other words, there have not been any guidelines or recommendations provided to the registrars. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess military mindset, you always want to verify, put eyes on things. So I ask questions And about that, I asked for the form. And on that form, are you a citizen? After that, that's it. Okay. And then you're gonna be registered. And so I asked him, I said, after that, I said, what is it you do to verify any of this? Well, we don't. But you can't, and they'll tell me, but you can't register if you're not a citizen. I said, so someone could lie to you, just put I'm a citizen, and then you register them. Now what you've done is you put the needle in the haystack, and now you got to dig the needle out. I mean, isn't it a lot easier to prevent the needle from getting in the haystack in the first place?
Exactly.
Seems like.
And then they look at me like deer in the headlights. So I said, what is it that you require? Well, your driver's license. I said, okay, fine. So I go to the DMV or the OMV here in the state of Louisiana, Office of Motor Vehicles, and I ask them, when somebody is first trying to get a driver's license, what is the requirement? So they told me one of those things is a birth certificate. Okay. And then some other forms of ID, like that you are a resident, some type of mail that proves that you're a resident or something like that. I said, okay, that's great. So what we have now is the Office of Motor Vehicles doing what the Secretary of State should be doing. And they're just taking the Office of Motor Vehicles' word for it, so to speak, instead of having that double layer of protection with the Secretary of State actually performing that function. Because as we all know, you may recall, in June of 2023, the Office of Motor Vehicles was hacked by China, and it's in the Advocate. It's in the mainstream media. I was floored when I saw and heard that. I read the entire article. But so that information is over there, the Office of Motor Vehicles. Now you got China hacking that. That is a backdoor way into our voter rolls.
1000%.
And it throws red flags in my mind all over the place. Why don't we have that double layer of protection within the Secretary of State's office to protect our elections?
Yeah,
it's an excellent point,
especially since it's required by law. You would think that would create a little bit of added incentive to do it. So
yeah,
I'm very gratified that this is an issue that will likely be raised in an amended suit, Jeff, because as we've discussed, it's really, really important, and it's good to have confirmation from you, Bert, that what we've suspected is that there really has not been any movement, and we just think it's inexcusable.
Yeah. And Chris, I'll just add, my dad's in the chat here on Rumble, and he said that our governor seems to support Operation Swamp Sweep. He should be eager to demand enforcement of this new law. Why not? It's a solid question.
Not? Yes. Well, that would be one of the first questions of a long list of questions that I could ask Governor Landry.
Well, that's
at this
true.
Point
related to this topic.
Yes, related to this topic. Let me ask about this last potential component of your amended suit, Jeff. This is a bill that Danielle can tell you absolutely incensed me from the moment it was proposed in 2025. Bert, I know you testified against this as well. This was a bill that was promoted and pushed by Nancy Landry in 2025, as I said. And the bill the new law prohibits ordinary Louisiana citizens from having the presumptive constitutional right to conduct lawful exit polls at voting precincts. Every other state in the country allows citizens to conduct lawful exit polls, law-abiding citizens. It is a core constitutional right, free speech, free assembly. Yet we have a new law in Louisiana that restricts that presumptive right to bona fide news organizations like CNN, MSNBC. You know, Jeff Wittenbrink, those reputable news outlets that we all go to get our news. I know you fixate on CNN, and if they say it, you know, it's got to be true. So they have the constitutional right to come into our state, eat our food, go to the voting precincts, conduct exit polls, and do whatever they want with that data. Yet Louisiana citizens who've lived here, pay taxes here, raised their kids here, bled here, sweat here, cried here, they don't have that basic right. And that law was signed by the governor. And as I said, we're the only state in the country that makes a distinction among citizens about who is afforded this basic right. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, sadly, you know, it's a very strange and anomalous sort of proposition that they would have this kind of limit. And it's my understanding that it came about over concerns over exit polls about all these issues and voter integrity. And so it's come to the Secretary of State's awareness that there are people opposing voting machines, that people are seeking election integrity, and it's as if those desires are trying to be thwarted. You know, there's really not a good reason to prevent someone from doing an election poll. I mean, it's not as if there's some big problem with people standing elbow to elbow, harassing all the voters as they come out of the polls. It's not as if, you know, you could see that there could be a problem. Say you had people coming out of the polls and you got 15 people in a row all wanting to poll each and every voter that comes out so they can verify a vote. You know, when you talk about place and order, you know, sort of time restrictions on freedom of speech, you can understand that. You want to have some kind of order there. But at the same time, why should the state be in the business of handing out who's bona fide as a journalist, who's bona fide as a news organization?
Exactly.
You know, it's really ridiculous. I mean, there could be a representative of your podcast should be able to stand there and poll the voters as they come out. And there's a great interest in the accuracy of the votes. And part of that is because of this system that we have where the votes are voted or counted privately, they're counted in a black box. People want to know. And so until that need for transparency is resolved, is fulfilled, until that need is taken care of, there are going to be movements to take more polls and to do more things to ensure that we're having properly vetted, properly counted elections. Election integrity is just essential to protecting our rights as American citizens. It's essential to electing the people that the people want in office, as opposed to whatever clique or whatever group of powerful people want to be elected. So,
very well said. Very well said, Jeff.
Continue.
Yeah, very well said, Jeff. And I think the real reason, if you look a couple of layers deep on this, the real reason why the Secretary of State pushed this legislation, it doesn't have anything to do with harassment at voting precincts. This was precipitated by 4 or 5 elderly women up in Shreveport who had the audacity to try to conduct a lawful exit poll at a polling precinct in Shreveport, and the concern that they were doing absolutely nothing wrong. They were actually maligned by the Secretary of State when she testified. She basically called them criminals, a total lie. But I think the real reason, what you're getting at here, the real reason, Jeff, why the Secretary of State proposed this law is because she's deathly afraid that there will actually be citizens who conduct comprehensive exit polls at voting precincts and compare the results of those exit polls to what's being spit out of these machines, actually providing evidence
Exactly.
that the results are being manipulated. That's her concern. And she predicated it under the false pretext that these ladies up in Shreveport were causing some kind of problem, and they were not. It was really unfortunate the way they were characterized before that committee. And Bert, you were there.
Yeah, my involvement was, okay, so we're trying to count our votes as publicly as possible and follow the Constitution, right? And that's not actually being done. So we have to find ways around it. These ladies, they contacted me. They knew I served on the Board of Election Supervisors, and I helped them locate the statute. I said, you could do an exit poll. Now, before you go and do that, there's also another statute that you need to read. And I sent that to them. That statute, it's either right before or right after the exit poll statute. And it describes in detail what you can and cannot do. And that's exactly what these ladies did. There was no harassment. They asked people questions after they voted, not before, so that you didn't look like it was electioneering or any of that type of stuff. You had to wait till after they voted. And even when people came up to them and said, hey, what's going on here? And they said, we're sorry, but we will talk to you after you vote. They literally instructed the voter on how to properly do this stuff. Now, they were bird dogged the entire time by their clerk of court or deputy clerk of court. They called us, and Nancy testified that she was literally going to have them arrested, but chose not to because she figured she would come in and just do the statute instead.
That's on the record.
And here's the thing: she couldn't arrest them because she had no grounds to arrest them. They were following the law. Now, what she did was create a law so that now she can go and arrest anybody that does something like this. And this is just totally law-abiding citizens simply wanting to understand their elections and get more of an accurate transparency about them. It goes on the same notion with when I made the request to audio and video record Board of Election Supervisors meetings for transparency, accountability of the board, and voter education. And when I said that, within 3 days, an amendment went on to an election bill that really wasn't germane to that bill to prohibit what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then on testimony, the Secretary of State was saying, we can't have people coming in off the street, video recording, Social Security numbers and all that. First thing, I never see a Social Security number while serving on the board. There's no need for me to do that. That's the Register of Voters purview. I don't have to worry about that. That's number one. Number two, I did not in any kind of way intend for people coming in off the street to disrupt a board meeting. That would be a violation of law in itself to disrupt a meeting in that kind of way.
Yeah.
So there are protections already there. And now she's just trying to make everything transparent criminal.
Yeah.
And
That's
I just...
That's right. And specifically, Bert, specifically on the issue of the exit polls by citizens. Jeff, the last time I read the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, I don't think it requires a citizen to explain to the government why they're exercising a constitutionally protected right of free speech and free assembly. Have you read in the Constitution anywhere where we have to tell the government why we're exercising a protected right?
No, there's certainly not any requirement to tell the government why you're exercising a protected right. That, again, that's the only excuse that they would have is that, there are time, place, and manner restrictions on just about every right protected by the Constitution, including freedom of speech, including freedom of assembly. And and those things have been detailed in different cases before the jurisprudence. And so that's why she had to come up with the excuse that these little old ladies were disturbing good order somehow. That was the only excuse that she could come up with. And so that's the one she used. Now, again, like I said, you have to really envision some kind of crazy scenario for that to happen. But no, there's no requirement for us ever to have to explain why we're exercising our freedom of speech, because it's a right and not a permission.
Yeah.
And one thing, I'm glad we're talking about this. One thing that Chris and I talked about, I think at length during the legislative session when this bill was, moving through the process, and we were lobbying hard against it, was that no one should have to even apply to the Secretary of State in the very first place to be able to conduct an exit poll. I don't understand why that is there.
No.
It doesn't make any sense.
No.
Jeff, your point about order, being orderly, I think, that's what law enforcement is for. I don't think, first of all, if there should be an application process, I would think it should be to the locality, to the registrar of voters or the clerk of courts, not to the Secretary of State. Why does she care what happens in Terrebonne Parish, East Baton Rouge Parish? It's not her business. It's her business to make sure the overall things happen correctly. And I think we've laid out in this conversation that she's not even doing the job that she needs to be doing. But one question for you on this, Jeff, is there a concern about a lack of standing? Because one issue that Chris and I have been talking about is that, or at least I've been encouraging, people need to apply. Non-bona fide media needs to apply to do exit polls in the case that we need someone to get rejected, so we have grounds on which to sue. Is that a concern in including this in your case?
Well, I don't know. I hadn't talked to Mr. Callais about including the part about exit polling in the case.
Okay.
Just because we don't have anyone conducting exit polls that would be a plaintiff, at least at this time. So yeah, you definitely would need someone who's applied and been rejected after the enactment of the new law, or that has gone out and attempted to do a poll, an exit poll, without getting permission or without being vetted somehow, and be found in violation of that statute. So yeah, right now we would have a standing issue clearly to add that to the lawsuit.
Okay.
Yeah. So just to be clear here, Jeff, for our listeners, you think that the standing issue would probably be resolved even if just an ordinary law-abiding citizen, let's say they didn't go through this application process, they just went straight to a voting precinct and they were turned away based on this law, that would potentially provide the standing that's necessary?
Yeah, I would think that would provide standing that's necessary. To the extent that, why would you have to have an application process? Why does the Secretary of State get to approve who can do one of these polls and then make them go and defend it?
Yeah. So that's important. That's a really important point.
Jeff, is it okay if it's a citizen, or would that fall under that stupid law that says only election officials can sue over election laws?
Well, so in this particular case, I think it could be just a regular citizen. I don't think it would have to be an election official. Bert's in a proper place because he has to verify the election.
Yeah.
So concerns about the election and the election process are actually within his purview. That's again, that's why I described him as a unicorn earlier, because he's just in a unique position. He's also in a unique position because he's one of the election officials that can't simply be fired. As he pointed out to me the other day when we were talking, he is an elected official, and that's what makes him an election official, as opposed to simply a commissioner at a local precinct. The commissioner at a local precinct raises an objection. Well, they can just get rid of that person. Yeah. They don't have to hire them. It's a very different situation with Bert.
But Jeff,
again,
but to be clear, your position more broadly, though, and I couldn't agree with you more, is that any citizen, in other words, Louisiana is uniquely restrictive in its standing requirements, and you believe that there should be legislation that creates statutory standing for any citizen who is alleging an irregularity or a deficiency that impacts our voting system. If they're a registered voter, that they should have statutory standing to bring that claim.
I do believe that there should be a statute to give standing to a regular citizen who's a registered voter. I don't know that we're unique. What I do know is that there are many states that allow the citizens to have standing because it's important. It's important for citizens to believe in the integrity of their elections. It's important for citizens to be able to hold their election officials accountable, and for there not to be an avenue to go to court means that you can't protect the rights of the citizens, and that's just unacceptable. So I give kudos to those states that recognize that, and especially when you're talking about election integrity and trying to protect your right to vote and make sure it's not diluted, make sure it's not thwarted, make sure it's not manipulated, that it's done publicly, counted publicly, and our votes preserved and violent, I think are just essential to protecting citizens' rights. Yes, I think there definitely needs to be legislation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Just need a brave legislator.
Yeah, it just seems unbelievable. It seems unbelievable that a registered voter who dutifully votes would not have a sufficient vested interest in ensuring that we have a fair, open, and transparent election system, that vested interest sufficient to confer standing to let a court look at it. I think it's ludicrous, and I agree with you 100% and we're going to bring that to the attention of some legislators and perhaps compare our current law on standing on this issue to the law in other states, and maybe we can get with you and discuss that further on that issue about what other states are doing on it.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Bert, how do people donate to the legal fund on this lawsuit? I know you've set something up, and we're encouraging citizens everywhere to chip in because the state has virtually unlimited resources, and as Jeff well knows, they have a tendency to bury you in paperwork, sometimes totally irrelevant. And so what are you? What's the link, or how do people donate to the legal fund on this?
So yeah, we set up a fund through a conservative bank. It's an actual bank. It's not a GoFundMe type thing, but through a bank, and it's oldgloryalliance.com, and you would look up Louisiana Election Defense Fund, and you can donate. And what we're asking, donate $10 or more and share it with 10 people. If we can get those numbers up, that would show, demonstrate interest in this thing. I would love to see it. I would love to see $10 coming from 1,000 people than $1,000 from just 10.
Although those 10 people who have $1,000 should not hesitate to give it. Bert, don't discourage that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. See,
not at all.
The thing here, Bert, you have a thoroughbred. I've known Jeff Wittenbrink for many, many years, and he's got an exquisite track record on constitutional issues. Pastor Spell, as we know, as Danielle may have mentioned earlier, this atrocious constitutional amendment 2, which Jeff provided great insight and influence on helping get that defeated. Thank God. So you have a thoroughbred in your corner here. You just got to keep him on the track. You got to keep him on the track.
Yeah.
So that's why we need people to donate.
I can't agree with you more. The first time I contacted Jeff was way back when we were having these lockdowns, and there was a school board meeting in Lafayette, and someone refused to put on a mask. And I heard about the issue with Pastor Spell. I knew about that from the news. And on my way back, driving from Lafayette in the school board meeting, I mean, we were just trying to defend basic human rights in our state and in our schools. And I was helping out some folks in Lafayette with that. I contacted Jeff. I called him up out of the blue. I don't know if Jeff will remember that or not, but that was me. And because this guy was getting thrown out of a school board meeting because he refused to wear a mask. And last time I saw that many masks being worn by people, they were shooting at me in Iraq. So, I have a real problem with that.
Yeah.
I could not believe what was going on in this country. And to be arrested because you don't have a mask, the guy's not sick or anything like that. There was no reason for it. But there we were. So I have total confidence in Jeff. And I wanted to add one thing while y'all were talking about the exit poll. We already had a statute, and this is fair play. All you needed to do was fill out a form to conduct an exit poll, which was going to notify the Secretary of State, and then the Secretary of State was going to in turn notify the clerk of court and register of voters to whatever precinct it was that was applicable to that request. And that's it. They were just going to be put on notice that you were going to be there. And that's fair. And that way you're not just showing up off the street, actually harassing people, but you're actually going through the channels, doing things legally and transparently. And this is what this is all about, right? So that's exactly what these ladies did. This is what I sent them the statutes to make sure, and they wanted to do it right, which they did. And now here we are with this prohibition.
And here we are. And what a difference there is between a presumption in favor of liberty and a presumption in favor of a restriction on liberty, which was what Jeff was alluding to earlier. It's these are issues that are just so vital, so important. Jeff, I know James Madison, who said that liberty is not lost through sudden and precipitous actions. Liberty is lost through what he calls death by 1,000 cuts, the gradual encroachment upon freedom that ultimately results in the loss of freedom. And this is the issues we're talking about today are just the kind of cuts that Madison was warning us against. So we're so thankful for you, Jeff, thankful for your courage, Bert, and we encourage people to all across the state, to donate to your legal fund so that this case can be brought to fruition for the benefit of all of us. So God bless you both.
Yeah. And I put it in the chat.
Well,
I put the link in the chat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
y'all.
Jeff.
Thank you so much for having us on. We appreciate you.
We look
Appreciate
forward
you.
to following this as it continues on down the line.
God bless.
Thank you. We'll definitely be in touch.
Awesome.
Take care.
God bless. Thank you both.
Y'all have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Bert.
Well, Chris, I do have to disagree with Bert on his point about the application process. It may be that it allows things to be orderly, but if you think about it, it's centralized control. That's what it is. It's not about order at all. If it was about order, we could just go and let local law enforcement know that we would be at the precinct.
And it, Danielle, it's exactly right. And it conditions the exercise of fundamental constitutional freedom on some action that a citizen has to take.
That's right.
And there is no constitutional requirement that the citizen satisfy any government imposed requirement in order to exercise core constitutional rights. That's
right.
The point. They 100%. Shouldn't have to tell anybody anything about when or whether or how or where they go do an exit poll. It's free speech, it's free assembly, and it's just inappropriate. And I agree with you 100%. I might not have even thought about that, Danielle, until you brought it up. And a number of times you've brought that issue up before, when I would say, you know what? They used to just have to go and fill out a form and say, I'll be doing an exit poll, and that's all there was to it. And you were saying, why do they even have to do that?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing to me, Chris, as the vaccine exemption forms. No, you don't get to exempt me. I exempt my damn self, and you can get out of my business.
Right. So basically what you're embracing here, Danielle, is the presumption in favor of liberty, which is consistent with the letter and the spirit of the law. We don't presume against liberty. And by imposing these requirements, you're presuming against liberty. And it is obnoxious in principle. And it's, it kind of alludes to what you told me quite a while back. I think we had done only a very few shows, and we were talking about the Second Amendment. And you quoted, the quote, "What part of thou shalt not infringe do you not understand?"
That's
and
right.
We were talking again about, whether or not the government can legally require a law-abiding citizen to get the government's permission through a permit to carry a handgun.
Yeah. You see this? Yeah. Do not tread on me. That signs back up.
I love it, dude. I always know you're in a fiery mood whenever that's up in the background.
Chris, you know what else struck me during the conversation today? When Jeff was talking about the machines and the fact that our elected officials, so many of our elected officials, but particularly the Secretary of State, because she's the one out front talking about this, believes that the machines are the way forward because it's too inconvenient to count them by hand, and that is too arcane. To those people, I would ask, how much of your china do you put in the dishwasher? You put your china in the dishwasher because it's inconvenient to hand wash your expensive china that you only bring out for Thanksgiving and Christmas and other special occasions? No. If it's something you care about, you do it the right way.
That's exactly right, Danielle. And you're the only one probably of sufficient brilliance that could use the word China in connection with our election system. And I could also use the word China in connection with our election system, because China controls, in many respects, our election system. But I think it's an interesting choice of words. But you're exactly right. So you would never sacrifice efficiency or sacrifice protecting your china, your silverware, at the altar of efficiency just because you can do it more quickly in a dishwasher. Because guess what? It ruins it. Yet we have election officials across the state who seem willing to sacrifice real election security at the altar of efficiency through these voting computers. So it's a very good analogy. There are certain things that, while they may require, and I don't know, Danielle, that it's going to require necessarily that much more effort. I don't know that it's going to necessarily be that much more cumbersome. I
know. I'll tell you one thing. It'll cost a heck of a lot less money, which means a lot fewer cronies getting their checks from different contracts. I think that has to be a big driver for this, Chris, and nobody can convince me otherwise.
And here you touch on the heart of the resistance. The heart of the resistance always goes back to who is getting paid to do what.
That's right.
And our government should be looking for ways to reduce spending, to increase transparency, unfortunately, that's too often not the case. But I'm thrilled to death, Danielle, that these issues are being raised and being brought up, because they're just so vital to liberty. They're not optional. This
No,
is not optional.
it's not optional. I'm so grateful for Bert, for his courage, for his willingness to stand up and fight. He just has the tenacity to get it done, and he is such a faithful warrior at the legislature. He's a faithful warrior. He's standing in the gap as an election commissioner, somebody who really believes in the sanctity of the vote, going and running for an office. Imagine that. And then here he is going to protect our rights through lawsuits that are making our voices heard in venues that they have not been heard. And so I just big shout out to Bert. I just really appreciate him so much. And Jeff, like you said, he is also a warrior in a different way, and has done so well for people whose rights have been violated by our government. And so it's time, Chris, that we, the people, are standing up. And I am grateful that our voices are getting heard in those halls. And I don't think that the elected officials really expected us to stand up and stay standing, and to speak up and keep speaking. And I think they're probably pretty darn annoyed with us by now. And that is the exact point. So keep speaking, keep showing up, keep letting your voice be heard, because they need to know that we're not going away, and that we are watching every single move they make, because they are supposed to be responsible to us. They're supposed to be representing us. They're supposed to be acting at our behest. They are not supposed to be doing what they want so that they can get paid.
And then too often lying about it.
Right.
To their constituents. So that is coming to an end, thank God. Because of a lot of hard work. But we are not, you're exactly right, Danielle, we're not going away. Increasing numbers of citizens are thoroughly skeptical of just about every facet of our government. It never ceases to amaze me how there's even 10 or 15 or 20 or 25, 30% of the population at this point that is not just reflexively skeptical of everything that our government says and does.
Yeah.
I don't understand what it's going to take until that number gets to 90 or 100%. And the only real explanation, Danielle, is that there is a sectus of society, including quite a few public officials, who have simply determined that their own personal enrichment and their own personal aggrandizement trumps their core responsibility to protect the citizens and our constitutional rights and transparency in government. That's the only explanation, because there's no possible way that they cannot know what is going on. There's no way. For instance, there's no way that Jeff Landry could possibly not know that SB 80, that peremptorily restricts citizens from exercising their free speech at polling precincts, is not unconstitutional. There's no way he cannot know that. There's no way the Secretary of State cannot know that.
Both are attorneys, right?
Both of whom are attorneys. Well, I believe, yeah, I know she is. There's no way that they cannot know that Louisiana is the only state in the country that makes a presumptive distinction between bona fide news organizations and ordinary citizens when it comes to the exercise of constitutionally protected rights. There's no way they cannot know that. So there has to be another motive for this.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid to say it's probably not a sincere one.
Well, it's power. It's power and control.
Power and control. But we're the sovereigns, Danielle, as you often say. We are the sovereigns, and we're going to continue to act as such and continue to demand that we are governed as such.
Yeah.
And it's such a pleasure and privilege to have Bert supporting LeCag and also, a friend of the State of Freedom. And we're just excited about everything that's coming, everything we've already done. And I want to encourage people to donate to the State of Freedom, subscribe to the State of Freedom, and take a look at our ad package for the State of Freedom, because we are really excited about promoting you, your business, your nonprofit, as long as we believe in it. You know, we have to believe in it to do it. But if we believe in it, we can do a very good job of promoting it and getting you on the map. So the State of Freedom is your family. If you are for limited government, you want to promote your business, your nonprofit, and you believe in liberty and the Constitution, we're your family. We're your resource.
Yeah. And Chris, I also want to take the opportunity to remind people, or if you didn't catch the last couple of episodes, we will be launching very soon an exclusive members only community for the State of Freedom. And we will have some exclusive interviews there and some exclusive discussions that are interactive with me and Chris, with guests, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned for that. But if you are interested in that at all and you want us to contact you about it as soon as it hits the presses, go to the State of Freedom and hit that button, sign up for exclusive updates, and we will get you on the list to be the first to know about it. We're really excited about being able to bring that to you next year, and we may start signups before too long. So looking forward to that. And just a couple other announcements, Chris. Tomorrow on For the Love of Freedom, Julie Lavender will be with me. She'll be talking about a new book. Her new book, that's a resource for parents to help their children walk through life's hurts with the Lord's healing and with his victory. And so if you are a parent or a grandparent, you'll want to tune into that. She is just a gift. She's an absolute gift. She teaches beautifully, and her heart is for liberty. And so I know you won't want to miss that. And then Thursday, we will be back with William Most. A lot of you will remember him from his conversations with us when we were all opposed to Constitutional Amendment 2. Was that earlier this year, Chris? It was this year.
Yes.
Good
Seems
grief.
like
It's been a long
5
year.
years ago.
It's been a long year.
Yes.
But he is representing the Southeastern University researcher who was exposing the toxicity of Lake Maurepas. And as soon as she exposed negative results, she got reassigned to a different job, and all her research capabilities were pulled from her. And so he will be with us talking about her tomorrow. And I am very much looking forward to that, because that reeks really, really bad, Chris.
Yeah. And it's so important because it dovetails with the carbon capture sequestration issue.
Yeah,
In fact,
absolutely.
I think most believes, I'm sure the professor at issue believes that one of the reasons why she was shut down so quickly and so decisively was because this, what she discovered plays into the ongoing effort by industry to do carbon capture and sequestration. And so that's a very important issue, and very much looking forward to having him on. Last point here, Danielle, is will we be, I think LeCag is going to probably put up the link to donate to Bert's lawsuit up on our website, and maybe we can do it also on the State of Freedom.
Yeah, we absolutely will. I put it in the chat for the show, but we can also put it in the chat on all of our social media. We'll absolutely do that.
Awesome. Well, Danielle, it's always a pleasure to be with you. It's been an hour and 28 minutes, and it feels like it's been about 5 minutes. So God bless you. And in the words of the one and only, the immortal William F. Buckley Jr., inveighing, we shall go.
Happy birthday, Chris. Thanks for spending some time with me this morning.
God bless.
God bless you. Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Lux Lion. My mission for Lux Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable, mission-driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxlion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic hormone-balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us.